How is President Trump's agenda being received in the suburbs of Washington, D.C.? Well, not well, according to Chris Bedford, as he wrote in his Beltway brief today. He joins us now to break it all down. So, Bedford, what's going on right now in D.C. as Trump's agenda is trying to get out there and take effect?
It's been incredible panic. I mean, it's something that you hear at school pickup. It's something you hear at sports practice. It's something you hear really anywhere you congregate with middle-aged adults all around Washington, D.C. At first, it was all about childcare. I mean, where am I going to put my kid? Who's going to stay home and play with my kids all day now that I actually have to show up at my six-figure job? This is insane. Who's going to allow this? I mean, these are actually like normal concerns for someone who's had a change in their schedule, but it's difficult to sympathize with you necessarily when the sense of entitlement to work like we do every day, like the rest of the country does every day, to make this six-figure salary, it's just kind of wild. And there's also a funny tinge to it, too, because they keep on talking about how this person who wasn't elected, Elon Musk, could possibly tell them what to do. When I have so far, to my wife's happiness, resisted the urge to ask any of these government workers to see their election certificate. Who exactly elected them to be in charge of Americans' lives? This is a new twist for us. But now it's also turning into kind of a panic because there's a lot of worry around town that maybe this is a fake offer. Maybe if I retire and I get 8 months of my salary and I get to try to figure out my life, what if they just revoke that? Now, I don't think that's going to happen. It's at the end of the day, it is the faith and trust of the federal government backed up by Democratic Party, which may come back into power in the midterms and parts of the Congress, who it's very important to them to be able to make sure that these payments go out. But this is not simply like a mechanic shop shutting down on one side of town and the mechanics have to figure out a job at another garage somewhere else. This is an industry. DC is insulated in a bubble. Even in the 2008 housing crisis, we barely took a dent. Prices have gone up and up and up. And that's because the government always pays its bills, like a bunch of Lannisters here in King's Landing. And at the same time, the government continues to grow. So there's a lot of people, 2 salaries, sometimes more if they're making money on the side, making six-figure jobs, inflating this around Washington, D.C. And they've developed skill sets and talents and connections which do not serve them in the broader world. Their options are often federal government or the vast network of nonprofits and non-governmental organizations or NGOs that exist around Washington, D.C., and the contractors that serve them make hundreds of millions of dollars doing so. If you cut off the money to those NGOs and nonprofits, and you cut off the employment at a lot of these agencies, there's not really a lot of options. And Joe Biden tried to do a bunch of things about this. Some of it was messed up by the courts. A lot of these people have student loans. To buy a 1970s, we've talked about this in the show, I'm not complaining about it all week. To buy a 1970s 3-bedroom ranch with 3 bathrooms, half an hour outside of D.C., costs like $1 million in an ugly neighborhood of Arlington. It's kind of psychotic. This fake economy is propped up by all of these paying jobs that are here in the district. You start to change that. I mean, houses start to sell. People need to sell. They need to move. They need to go to a place that they can afford better. They need to search for jobs. They're no longer here in the district. The market starts to drop. The housing market's decided by what your neighbors sell for. And if one of your neighbors or 2 of your neighbors has to have a fire sale, then everyone's value goes down because that place is sold for $800,000. It's not worth $1 million anymore. This is going to have a ripple effect. Even though the courts are working to try and change this, if this lasts a year, 2 years, this DC economy and the machine that's grown up around it, this not shining city on a hill, but an oiled machine in the swamp, will start to have serious cultural changes that cannot simply be fixed with the stroke of a pen by a future Democratic president in somewhere between 4 and 15 years. This is going to be this is a real culture change in Washington, and you're starting to see it affected sometimes in hysterical ways and sometimes in very serious ways.
I love the fact that you pointed out that these people weren't affected by the 2008 housing crisis, which is very true. I mean, the bubble really hasn't burst before. But I think there's 2 tracks here, I suppose, of fear on their part. I mean, one is the fact that they disagree with Donald Trump and think everyone he's putting into office is crazy and the enemy. And the other is the very simple one, which is I'm going to lose my job. What do you think is going to play out over the next year? I mean, do you think that the losing of jobs will continue? He's just going to slash a bunch of the jobs. I mean, is that the main fear everyone has? Because when you look at it, only a very small portion of government workers have either taken the buyout or left yet. Is it a fear of that happening, and how much of it is just a disgust with what's happened, to their beloved government?
The message boards, the email listservs, which I was made privy to, show a real disgust with the president. I mean, people think. Remember in 2020 when COVID was going on, these people really compared themselves to the French resistance. They cosplayed the entire time as if they were fighting Nazis. Granted, they were the ones who were wearing black masks and attacking political opponents in the streets. They were the ones who were calling the police on priests who were holding services to have them arrested for endangering public health. There's not a lot of self-awareness in this whole crew of people. And they really consider themselves part of the resistance. Now, some of that's faded, but you still see it with neighborhood moms listservs, Lululemon moms listservs, asking who's got a USAID flag that I can fly in front of my house next to my Ukrainian flag, next to my rainbow flag, next to my DC flag, to show how moral and how morally superior I am. Kind of like the modern liberal equivalent of putting lamb's blood above your door so the angel of judgment passes by you. And this whole crew is part of that, and they want to stay and fight. They're saying this is the resistance. You can't let fascism win. Fascism, I guess, is making you come to the office, or saying your services are no longer required for this particular position you've been paid for and haven't gone to for years. But at the same time, there's a lot of other people who are saying, well, this is a risk. And 8 months unemployment is a phenomenal offer, 8 months at full pay. But when your industry and your skill set has been devastated, 8 months goes by real quick. If you're near retirement, take it. If you're a young person who's got nothing to pay for except for his beer budget and his bills, maybe that's not a problem. But if you've got 2 kids in private school, if you're paying for college tuition, if you've got this mortgage that's hanging over your head, there's definitely a lot of calculations that have to be going into that, and I'll be interested. They've been carefully launching these lawsuits at the last minute to try and hold them up, to get emergency judgments. This is about to happen any day now. It was announced weeks ago, but they don't launch the lawsuit until 48 hours before a decision comes down. That's an intelligent tactic. But come Monday, I don't see how a federal judge could find it actually unconstitutional for the president to offer buyouts to employees of the president. I think the president's going to win on that one. He may lose some other battles, but that one he's pretty solid on. I expect you'll see a flood of resignations in those last hours.
Well, Chris, earlier this week, we were talking about Kash Patel going through, and he hasn't even been confirmed as the FBI director. And yet there are already all of these changes that we're seeing with the FBI. Well, last night we see Russ Vought get confirmed by the Senate. Now, DOGE is working hand in hand with the Office of Management and Budget. Now, I ask you this because there's a leader in place now at a very important position. Right. And we know that the Democrats, they opposed him this time around. Russ Vought, he was so effective, though, the first time. So how should they be concerned now if you're a Democrat and you're listening to everything that you've just laid out about what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now? What do you think is going to be the future now that they actually have their leader in place in Russ Vought?
Oh, well, this is a hard place for Democrats to be in. I've got a piece coming out on the Beltway Brief on Monday about this, because they're stuck trying to generate and gin up opposition to an organization that most Americans have never heard of. They haven't been able to pick their fights at all. They're trying to make a villain out of Russ Vought, who doesn't really look or fit the mold of a villain, and most Americans have never heard of and will probably have forgotten his name already. And at the end of the day, he's incredibly powerful. He is incredibly influential. And of all of the veterans of 2017's administration, him, Stephen Miller, a few others, are among the most effective. One of the people who are extremely intelligent, who have made a living understanding and absolutely nerding out over every aspect of federal government, who is completely committed to the MAGA agenda and trying to make sweeping changes. This is his life's mission. And he now has this opportunity in a way, and kind of he's unchained in a way that he never was he's never been in this position with the president's backing, with the DOGE backing, with things that are going on. He's going to be someone who Democrats are going to try and make a huge villain of. I don't think it's going to sway any voters. You might see some hardcore left-wing activists who already hate him continue to hate him. They'll try to make his life miserable. But at the end of the day, he's feeling pretty happy right now. He's giving thanks to God. He's tweeting that out. And he's going to get to work, and he will have a serious impact on exactly what we're talking about, which is the future of this federal government. I mean, I think we're kind of undergoing a Cold War, a cold style revolution in D.C., and that's happened before, so don't get too panicked over it. The government that George Washington set up was probably not recognizable to someone who lived 10 years after Abraham Lincoln, and the same thing goes for 10 years after the progressives or 10 years into the Cold War. Our government has changed pretty dramatically. We try to keep some semblance of the republic intact with the way we elect people. Even that has changed. And this seems like the beginning of the end of that post-Cold War coalition between the progressives in government, the big government people, and the blob defense industrial complex that have kind of came together in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, governed everything, wanted everything to go their way, continued to spend how they wanted to, continued to spread their kind of crazy ideas. And it's over now. I think it's just the beginning of this, and it could be undone. But people like Elon and now people like Russ coming into power, they are important generals to have on the field.
Amen to all that. I think that is exactly right. What we need to know, though, about this guy coming in, our buddy Russ here, is going to be essential for him. He's not the bad guy. They stayed up all night to filibuster or whatever. They're willing to do whatever silly things, and they failed. But the bad guy right now is still Musk. And what's very interesting to me is if you got a guy like Russ Vought in there who's tan, rested, and ready, is smart, knows what to do, and he pals with Musk a little bit, what do we know anything about that relationship? Because that would be incredibly interesting.
Musk is a constant presence around the old executive office building, which is where Russ's office is. I remember the first time I came into Russ's office in 2018 or so, it was sparsely decorated except for a single portrait of Calvin Coolidge, who's someone whose governing philosophy I think he shares. And I started there and I said, that's a wonderful portrait of Coolidge. And he seemed surprised that I recognized that. It was like a little secret thing that he had in his office that wasn't noticed by a lot. And Elon Musk is a constant presence in there. He moved his office. He's got an office in the old Secretary of War's room, and he has a lot of his team just around the corner in a more modern-looking building, not a government-looking building. But he liked the old office meeting room for the Secretary of War, and they've been setting up camp there. So they're going to be in the same building. They're going to be passing in the hallways. And I've got friends at the top of the White House now who are saying, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but Elon Musk knows my name, knows where my office is. Yep. He checks in all the time. I text these guys and say, you want to come over for dinner? And they say, maybe if dinner is served at 11 p.m. on Sunday, because right now I'm at the office and I won't be leaving. They're working around the clock, and they will be working closely together.
I love it. That's what you want to see, though. You know, government efficiency and actually people that are working on our behalf. I don't even understand.
It's so weird.
It's so weird to even be having this conversation.